Legendary Passages, Episode 34, The End of the Argonauts. The Children of Medea and Heracles, from Diodorus Siculus, Library of History. This time, Jason remarries. Medea kills his bride, marries Aegeus, leaves Athens, and her son Medus becomes king. After reviewing signs of the Argonauts' voyage, the passage jumps ahead to the sons of Heracles, their war with Eurystheus, and the Dorian Invasion. The End of the Argonauts, a legendary passage from Diodorus Siculus, Library of History, translated by C.H. Oldfather. Jason and Medea in Corinth. The account runs like this. Jason made his home in Corinth, and living with Medea for 10 years, he begat children by her, the two oldest, Thessalus and Alcimenes, being twins, and the third, Tisandrus, being much younger than the other two. Now during this period, we are informed, Medea was highly approved by her husband, because she not only excelled in beauty, and was adorned with modesty and every other virtue, but afterward, as time more and more diminished her natural comeliness, Jason, it is said, became enamoured of Glaucê, Creon's daughter, and sought the maiden's hand in marriage. After her father had given consent, and set a date for the marriage, Jason, they say, at first tried to persuade Medea to withdraw from their wedlock of her free will. For, he told her, he desired to marry the maiden, not because he felt his relations with Medea were beneath him, but because he was eager to establish a kinship between the king's house and his children. But when his wife was angered, and called upon the gods, who had been the witnesses of their vows, they say that Jason, disdaining the vows, married the daughter of the king. Thereupon Medea was driven out of the city, and being allowed by Creon but one day to make the preparations for her exile, she entered the palace by night, having altered her appearance by means of drugs, and set fire to the building by applying to it a little root which had been discovered by her sister Circe, and had the property that when it was kindled it was hard to put out. Now when the palace suddenly burst into flames, Jason quickly made his way out of it, but as for Glaucê and Creon, the fire hemmed them in on all sides, and they were consumed by it. Certain historians, however, say that the son of Medea brought to the bride gifts which had been anointed with poisons, and that when Glaucê took them and put them about her body, she herself met her end, and her father, when he ran to help her and embraced her body, likewise perished. Although Medea had been successful in her first undertakings, yet she did not refrain, so we are told, from taking her revenge upon Jason. For she had come to such a state of rage and jealousy, yes, even of savageness, that, since he had escaped from the peril which threatened him at the same time as his bride, she determined, by the murder of the children of them both, to plunge him into the deepest misfortunes. For, except for the one son who made his escape from her, she slew the other sons, and in the company with her most faithful maids fled into the dead of night from Corinth, and made her way safely to Heracles in Thebes. Her reason for doing so was that Heracles had acted as a mediator in connection with the agreements which had been entered into the land of the Colchians, and had promised to come to her aid if she ever should find them violated. Meanwhile, they go on to say, in the opinion of everyone, Jason, in losing his children and wife, had suffered only what was just. Consequently, being unable to endure the magnitude of the affliction, he put an end to his life. The Corinthians were greatly distressed at such a terrible reversal of fortune, and were especially perplexed about the burial of the children. Accordingly, they dispatched messengers to Pytho to inquire of the god what should be done with the bodies of the children. And the Pythian priestess commanded them to bury the children in the sacred precinct of Hera, and to pay them honors which are recorded to heroes. After the Corinthians had performed this command, Thessalus, they say, who had escaped being murdered by his mother, was reared as a youth in Corinth, and then removed to Iolcus, which was the native land of Jason. And finding on his arrival that Acastus, the son of Peleus, had recently died, he took over the throne which belonged to him by inheritance, and called the people who were subject to himself Thessalians after his own name. I am not unaware that this is not the only explanation given of the name the Thessalians bear. The fact is, the other accounts which have been handed down to us are likewise at variance with one another, and concerning these we shall speak on a more appropriate occasion. Medea and Aegeus. Now as for Medea, they say, On finding upon her arrival in Thebes that Heracles was possessed of a frenzy of madness, and had slain his sons, she restored to him health by means of drugs. But since Eurystheus was pressing Heracles with his commands, she despaired of receiving any aid from him at the moment, and sought refuge in Athens with Aegeus, son of Pandia. Here, as some say, she married Aegeus, and gave birth to Medus, who was later king of Medea. But certain writers give the account that, when a person was demanded by Hippotes, the son of Creon, she was granted a trial and cleared of the charges raised against her. After this, when Theseus returned to Athens from Troezen, a charge of poisoning was brought against her, and she was exiled from the city. But by the gift of Aegeus, she received an escort to go with her to whatever country she might wish, and she came to Phoenicia. Medea in Asia. From there she journeyed into the interior regions of Asia, and married a certain king of renown, to whom she bore a son Medus. And the son, succeeding to the throne after the death of the father, was greatly admired for his courage, and named the people Medes after himself. Speaking generally, it is because of the desire of the tragic poets for the marvelous that so varied and inconsistent an account of Medea has been given out. And some indeed, in their desire to win favor with the Athenians, say that she took Medus, who she bore to Aegeus, and got off safe to Colchis. And at that time Aeetes, who had been forcibly driven from the throne by his brother Perses, had regained his kingdom, Medus, Medea's son, having slain Perses, and that afterwards Medus, securing the command of an army, advanced over a large part of Asia, which lies above the Pontus, and secured possession of Medea, which has been named after this Medus. But since in our judgment it is unnecessary, and would be tedious to record all the assertions which the writers of myths have made about Medea, we shall add only those items which have been passed over concerning the history of the Argonauts. Argonauts, alternate roots. Not a few, both of the ancient historians and of the latter ones as well, one of whom is Timaeus, say that the Argonauts, after the seizure of the fleece, learning that the mouth of the Pontus had already been blockaded by the fleet of Aeetes, performed an amazing exploit which is worthy of mention. They sailed, that is to say, up the Tanis River as far as its sources, and at a certain place they hauled the ship overland, and following in turn another river which flows into the ocean, they sailed down it to the sea. Then they made their course from the north to the west, keeping the land on the left, and when they had arrived near Gadara, they sailed into our sea. And the writers even offer proof of these things, pointing out that the Celts who dwell along the ocean venerate the Discoride above any of the gods, since they have a tradition handed down from the ancient times that these gods appeared among them coming from the ocean. Moreover, the country which skirts the ocean bears, they say, not a few names which are derived from the Argonauts and the Dioscuri. And likewise the continent of this side of Gadara contains visible tokens of the return voyage of the Argonauts. So, for example, as they sailed about the Tyrrhenian Sea, when they put in at the island called Aethalia, they named its harbor, which is the fairest of any in those regions, Argo, after their ship, and such has remained its name to this day. And in like manner to what we have just narrated, a harbor in Etruria, 800 stadies from Rome, was named by them Telamon, and also at Formia, in Italy, the harbor Aeetes, which is now known as Caetes. Furthermore, when they were driven by the winds to Syrtes, and had learned from Triton, who was king of Libya at the time, of the peculiar nature of the sea there, upon escaping safe out of the peril, they presented him with the bronze tripod which was inscribed with ancient characters, and stood until rather recent times among the people of Euhesperus. You must not leave unrefuted the account of those who state that the Argonauts sailed up the Ister River as far as its sources, and then, by its arm which flows into the opposite direction, descended to the Adriatic Gulf. For time has refuted those who assumed that the Ister, which empties by several mouths into the Pontus, and the Ister, which issues into the Adriatic, flow from the same regions. As a matter of fact, when the Romans subdued the nation of the Istrians, it was discovered that the latter river has its source only 40 stadies from the sea. The cause of the error on the part of historians was, they say, the identity in the name of the two rivers. the Heraclides and Eurystheus. Since we have sufficiently elaborated the history of the Argonauts and the deeds accomplished by Heracles, it may be appropriate also to record, in accordance with the promise we made, the deeds of his sons. Now after the deification of Heracles, his sons made their home in Trachis, at the court of Ceyx the king. But later, when Hylas and some of the others had attained manhood, Eurystheus, being afraid lest, after they had all come of age, he might be driven from his kingdom of Mycenae, decided to send the Heraclid in exile from the whole of Greece. Consequently, he served notice upon Ceyx the king, to banish both the Heraclid and the sons of Alcimenes, and Aeolus as well, and the band of Arcadians who had served with Heracles on his campaigns, adding that, if he should fail to do these things, he must submit to war. But the Heraclid and their friends, perceiving that they were of themselves not sufficient in number to carry on a war against Eurystheus, decided to leave Trachis of their own free will, and going about among the most important of the other cities, they asked them to receive them as fellow townsmen. But no other city had the courage to take them in. The Athenians alone of all, such being their inborn sense of justice, extended a welcome to the sons of Heracles, and they settled them and their companion in the flight in the city of Trichortheus, which is one of the cities of what is called the Tetrapolis. And after some time, when all the sons of Heracles had attained to manhood, and a spirit of pride sprang up in the young men because of the glory of descent from Heracles, Eurystheus, viewing with suspicion their growing power, came up against them with a great army. But the Heraclid, who had the aid of the Athenians, chose as their leader Aeolus, the nephew of Heracles, and after entrusting to him and Theseus and Hylas the direction of the war, they defeated Eurystheus in a pitched battle. In the course of the battle, the larger part of the army of Eurystheus was slain, and Eurystheus himself, when his chariot was wrecked in the flight, was killed by Hylas, the son of Heracles. Likewise, the sons of Eurystheus perished in the battle to a man. After these events, all the Heraclid, now that they had conquered Eurystheus in a battle whose fame was noised abroad, and were well supplied with allies because of their success, embarked upon a campaign against Peloponnesus with Hylas as their commander. Atreus, after the death of Eurystheus, had taken over the kingship in Mycenae, and having added to his forces the Taciatans and certain other people as allies, he went forth to meet with the Heraclid. When the two armies were assembled at the isthmus, Hylas, Heracles' son, challenged him to single combat any one of the enemy who would face him, on the agreement that, if Hylas should conquer his opponent, the Heraclid should receive the kingdom of Eurystheus, but that, if Hylas were defeated, the Heraclid would not return to Peloponnesus for a period of 50 years. Aegeus, the king of the Taciatans, came out to meet the challenge, and in the single combat which followed, Hylas was slain, and the Heraclid gave up, as they had promised, their effort to return, and made their way back to Trichortheus. Some time later, Alcimenes and his sons, and Tlepolemus, the son of Heracles, made their home in Argos, the Argives admitting them to citizenship of their own accord, but all the rest who had made their homes in Trichortheus, when the 50-year period had expired, returned to the Peloponnesus. Their deeds we shall record when we have come to those times. Alcmene returned to Thebes, and when some time later she vanished from sight, she received divine honors at the hands of the Thebans. The rest of the Heraclid, they say, came to Aegeus, the son of Dorus, and demanding back the land which their father had entrusted to him, made their home among the Dorians. The exile of Tlepolemus. But Tlepolemus, the son of Heracles, while he dwelt in Argos, slew Lysimnius, the son of Electrion, we are told, in a quarrel over a certain matter, and being exiled from Argos because of this murder, changed his residence to Rhodes. The island was inhabited at that time by Greeks who had been planted there by Priapus, the son of Phorbius. Accordingly, Tlepolemus, acting with the common consent of the natives, divided Rhodes into 3 parts, and founded there 3 cities, Lindus, Ilesus, and Camerus, and became king over all the Rhodians, because of the fame of his father Heracles, and in later times took part with Agamemnon in the war against Troy.